All right, everyone should be getting a consent option. Go ahead and click yes or continue, and then we can go ahead and get started. So my name is Carlos Martin. I'm with PHAGE Corporation, acting as one of the research coordinators for the Pearl trial that is being sponsored and managed by AgelessRx, where Dr. Z is co-founder, operator, and one of the most licensed physicians we probably have in the country right now. Dr. Z, do you want to go ahead and take it? And your slides are already being presented, just to give you a heads up.
Perfect. All right, thanks for the introduction. Thank you for everybody for being here tonight. I'm excited to present this. Some of you may have already seen some of these slides. There was that recording the presentation I made a few months ago with the Leaf Foundation having invited me to present. So some of it will be familiar if you've watched that already, but there's definitely be some new material here. So don't go to sleep just yet. All right, so let's just jump in. I tend to speak a little bit quickly. Thankfully, it's recorded, and we can make the slides available as well. So if there's something that wasn't clear, please feel free to ask, and also the recording will be available. But I have about 70 slides and probably only about 50 minutes. So, all right. All right, here we go. So, who am I? Just make it brief. So I'm a physician. I got interested in functional medicine or holistic medicine pretty early on. Really had a passion for trying to find the root cause of disease. And as a lot of people know in the community, premature aging is the ultimate cause of a lot of our diseases. As Carla mentioned, I'm licensed in all 50 states, probably one of the few physicians in the country who are. I started that journey a few years ago, kind of seeing that telemedicine is becoming a trend. I had no idea the pandemic will accelerate telemedicine and kind of bring it to the forefront. I've worked with several, well-known telemedicine companies out there. Like I started out with like Teladoc and Amwell. Did some work with HIMSS and the Pill Club, and then I co-founded AgelessRx. We launched as Qualitude a little over a year ago, and we've been growing ever since. So our research team, we have Carlo, we have Varsha, and Dr. Watson is our principal investigator out of the UCLA. He's a professor there. And then we have Dr. Wooters, who helped do a lot of the background research and protocol reporting and things like that. All right, so premature aging is the ultimate cause of disease. We talked about that, finding that passion to treat root causes of diseases actually kept me in medical school. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be a doctor today if I didn't discover this kind of field of medicine. AgelessRx, like I said, launched about a little over a year ago. We changed our name a few months ago, and we've been growing ever since. We're listed as a public benefit corporation. That just means that we're kind of mission driven. We currently provide prescription therapies, but we're funding research. We'll be funding a lot of other initiatives in the future. Longevity, I don't think I have to introduce longevity very much, but basically it's the idea of kind of biohacking or finding various different therapies to enhance not only living longer but also living healthier. And then, currently on our platform, we offer metformin, NAD replacement, low-dose naltrexone. We recently launched tadalafil, which is an erectile dysfunction medication, but actually there's some indication it potentially has some benefits for longevity as well. Again, we hope to kind of research that a little bit further. And then, a lot of people have been asking us about other therapies like rapamycin, dasatinib, other senolytics, things of that nature. Unfortunately, a lot of those are experimental, and the dosings for healthy humans haven't really been well defined. And so this Pearl trial, we'll talk a little bit about this, but the Pearl trial will allow us to build the infrastructure to start looking at some of these more potentially stronger and more promising therapies. Dr. Nir Barzilai, I'm sure a lot of you know him. He made a statement that the wide public should be actively involved evaluating evaluation studies, not just as test subjects, but as active and empowered citizen scientists. And we're kind of taking that and running with it. So for those of you who don't know, PEARL stands for Participatory Evaluation of Aging with Rapamycin for Human Longevity. A lot of times you want to name your study, so it has a good acronym. What is rapamycin? It's an FDA-approved medication. It's currently approved mostly for use with transplant patients. It was isolated from bacteria from Easter Island. At a daily, relatively high dose, it's actually an immune suppression, hence the use with the transplant patients, but also has some unwanted effects on glucose and insulin dysregulation. At lower and intermittent dosing, it actually has the opposite effect. It enhances the immune system, we think, as well as induces autophagy, and actually can help with insulin and glucose regulation. So it's a matter of finding the right dose, and nobody really knows what the right dose is for human longevity. There's a lot of theories, there's a lot of extrapolations, there's a lot of opinions out there, but there's very little research trials on humans. Very few, if any, randomized controlled trials with placebos and things like that. So rapamycin, I mean, you have mTOR, and then you have the mTORC1 and mTORC2 complex, and this this delicate balancing act between inhibiting mTORC1 versus or TORC1 versus TORC2, and you can see that TORC1 is involved in protein synthesis, translation, nutrient sensing and support, and autophagy, and so it's kind of like a double negative. If you block mTORC1, you stimulate autophagy. But you don't want to mess with the TORC2. That's kind of where it's thought that the insulin dysregulation and the immune suppression starts to come in. So you do have to be careful with dose, and that's the reason why we're doing this under an IRB approved protocol. So here's a graphic I pulled from Molecular Cancer Therapeutics. It actually involves this a PLD inhibitor, but I thought the graphic was very nice, so I thought I'd share it. Basically, it's like you want the TORC1, but not the TORC2. It's probably a little bit more complicated than that. It always is, but this is just kind of a basic overview. And then you have various different enzymes and proteins and things like that. Like, for example, this was interesting. S6K promotes the production of fat cell, and so if you block this S6K, then you reduce the production of new fat cells. And then this 4E-BP1 is involved in insulin signaling, and so at low dose rapamycin, you don't mess with that. At high dose, you do, and so that, again, it's a balancing act. You have to find the right dose, and that's what we're about with the study. And then Professor Kamerlein at University of Washington, he's become famous for the dog aging trial study, and he basically says that rapamycin increases lifespan by 10 to 30% in multiple strains of mice. And Dr. Blakosklony, he's one of our advisors, and has donated generously as well to the Pearl trial. If rapamycin mechanism of action does not slow down aging, then everything we know about it, biology is wrong. So we've got a lot riding on this trial. Again, a little bit more about rapamycin. Has to do with cell growth, cell survival, metabolism, autophagy. And then there's some other things as well with the TORC1, improved neurological function. And here's some of the studies: reversal of age-related cardiac dysfunction, immune dysfunction, physical activity. And I had the last few slides are there's about 30 or so resources that we've scoured in order to come up with all this information. So in mice, increases lifespan, improves bone and cardiovascular health. In dogs, they share the same environment we live in, man's best friend, but they age 7 to 10 times faster. But the interesting thing about them is they seem to be affected, domestic dogs anyway, seem to be affected by similar age-related diseases as us: cancer, heart disease, diabetes, things like that. And then there was an article, I believe, back in the summer on this BBC Science Focus that focused on the dog aging project. It's a large 80,000 dog and growing dog, trial to look at. It's a project to look at dog aging, and I think they're in the process of enrolling. I haven't looked at their updates in a while, but they're in the process of enrolling about 500 dogs to look at rapamycin. In humans, there have been a few trials, and they look promising. And you've got, reduces cellular senescence and improves histological signs of aging in the skin. I think that has to do with topical rapamycin, which is something we might actually be offering in the near future. And then interesting, a rapalog actually improved influenza vaccine response by 20% in the elderly population. I believe that was Joan Manick's work, Dr. Manick's work, the RTB 101. And of course, what's a presentation these days without mentioning COVID? And Joan Mannix is quoted for saying that in phase 2 studies, this rapalog was observed to upregulate innate antiviral gene expression, and therefore has the potential to be pan-antiviral immunotherapy. And there was talk of studying this rapalog in preventing COVID-19. I'm not sure what came of the study. Unfortunately, I believe Restore Bio was purchased by Adicet, I believe is how you pronounce it, not too long ago, I think a few months ago. And I'm not even sure what the fate of the rapalog is. And there's a couple other companies that have come and unfortunately gone that were developing rapalogs, and the story's not over, though. I'm sure that we're going to see a lot more come up, especially as we see more and more interest in rapalogs and aging, especially if companies can or lobbyist companies, organizations can convince the FDA to recognize aging as a disease. And then, like I said, I mean, there doesn't seem to be any shortage of people who self-experiment, self-medicate, but we feel it has to be done correctly and safely. My hat goes out to people who've tried it on their own, through various different channels, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Our study design, 4 dosing schedules. We're looking mainly for both safety and efficacy. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So our phase 1, we're targeting 375 participants, plus or minus. I think the minimum number we need is about 200, 250 in order to get good data, decent data out of it. But if we can get to our full 375 or more, that would be great. It all comes down to funding. We'll talk a little about that towards the end as well. Once we determine the safety and potential, the safety and efficacy of the 1 or more of the doses, we're hoping that 1 dose will stick out and we can move on to that dose into a larger trial, maybe up to 1,000 or more. And then look at rapamycin in combination. It's possible rapamycin along with metformin or some other therapy, nutrient, something would be much more effective or synergistic. But it's possible the other way around. Maybe you don't want to take metformin and rapamycin. Maybe you're inhibiting mTOR too much. Or maybe you have to alter the dose. So we're not quite sure yet. Like I said, as far as I know, there aren't any studies on metformin and rapamycin. All right, so here's a little bit of new news, just kind of hot off the press today. If you look at our original protocol, we adjusted one of the dosings. So originally we had 1.5 milligrams 3 days a week as one of our dosing protocols. We actually removed that in favor of a 10 milligram once a week. This is based on the feedback from some of our advisors and some of the community as well. So we think a lot of people will be pleased for the inclusion of that 10 milligram once a week. And of course, what's a good trial without a placebo? Study population, there's a bunch of inclusion criterias, age, and basically, you have to be willing and able to participate. Exclusion, we have several here listed. We've decided to exclude any premenopausal females. Basically, if women are still in their menopausal years, they won't be able to participate. Sorry. And there's a few others as well. And we've carefully selected this list as, to make sure we don't have any unwanted side effects or cause any of these things to be worse. So we have primary endpoints and we have secondary endpoints. We've decided that a primary endpoint will be change in visceral fat by DEXA scan. The reason for that is our PI, Dr. Watson, actually did a small scale rapamycin trial where he looked at various different biomarkers, and what kind of stood out was this reduction in visceral fat, and it's considered to be like a clinical endpoint as well. So not only do we know that rapamycin seems to help with it based on previous data, but like I said, it's kind of you can't use methylation clock as a clinical endpoint. You have to have something a little bit more. I'm not sure what the term to use for that. And then secondary endpoints, we'd be looking at fat and lean body changes, adverse reactions, obviously, when it comes to safety. And then, our objectives. So we have several objectives with this trial. Objective number one is to just look at the safety of rapamycin and study it in healthy adults looking to take it for aging. We'll be looking at health surveys as well as blood panels. Patients may ask about side effects and things like that. We'll be watching for changes in renal function, liver enzymes, glucose dysregulation, electrolyte disturbances, changes to the blood counts, and then the other thing is changes in lipid composition. And then side effects. The side effect that seems to come up over and over again is mouth ulcers, stomatitis, and that seems to be fairly common, especially early on. From what I've heard, it's not. I mean, it's annoying, but not dangerous. And we're hoping just a little bit of mouthwash or maybe a gel of some sort might be able to mitigate that. But also reported as nausea, diarrhea, and then impaired wound healing is another potential. Again, that could be dose dependent, and that's part of the reason why if you're scheduled for surgery in the next 6 to 12 months, then we ask that you maybe join us later during phase 2. More seriously, I mean, if you Google Mayo Clinic sirolimus side effects, sirolimus is the drug name for rapamycin, you'll see a long list. And part of the reason is, again, because of the dosing, and the other thing is because of patient population. I mean, up until recently, rapamycin mostly been used in really sick patients. But from our perspective, it seems like what we need to look out for is potentially an increased susceptibility to infections like pneumonia, soft tissue. So we'll be watching for these closely. All right, and then objective 2 is to look at efficacy from a longevity standpoint. And this is where we're kind of looking at like biophysical endpoints. Somebody asked about methylation clock in the chat. Yes, that's definitely going to be a big thing for us. We'll be looking at a whole panel of things, as many things as we can kind of get our hands on, and as we can afford to look at. And obviously, and as is practical. I mean, if this is a completely remote trial, so obviously we're not going to be able to go around and get biopsies from people, not easily anyway. But we can do DEXA scans. Some people send people to various different centers to do DEXA scan, blood work, urine, stool, things like that. And there's a whole variety of tests we want to run. And I'll spend a few minutes talking about those tests. So a DEXA, DEXA scan, we have a partner, DEXAFit. They have about 25 and growing locations around the country. Hopefully most people will be within driving distance. If not, we can work to try to find another body composition center that would give us the information that we're looking for. And then, like I said, our primary is this VAT, visceral adipose tissue. It's the hidden fat around the organs. Here's a little representational picture of it. And we talked a little bit about the why. But of course, for those who don't know what visceral fat is, it's been, excess visceral fat has been linked to type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, inflammatory disease, and the list kind of goes on and on. It seems like every day we're linking something new to visceral adipose tissue. And shrinking that visceral adipose tissue is not an easy task. And so in and of itself, if we're able to succeed just in that one marker, I think that would be a good thing, because it's not an easy thing to do. And then we'll be looking, part of the efficacy as well is kind of like well-being surveys. These are standardized surveys like the WOMAC and the SF36, just asking a bunch of questions about, function, mood, energy, things like that. All right, let's get to some of the science here. So somebody asked about methylation clock. Now, this is kind of a hot topic in the field of aging. A lot of companies are working on these, and basically, you can get the DNA from either blood cells or from saliva. We're actually hoping to look at both. Some of the newer chips can look at up to 900,000 CpG sites, and then there are, it seems like every day there's a new algorithm to analyze these. A little bit about DNA methylation for those people who don't know. Basically, DNA is considered to be digital. You know, you've got the ACT and G. That doesn't really change. We thought maybe that degraded or changes with aging. It doesn't really seem to change all that much. I mean, obviously, you can have DNA damage and things like that. But the main driver of aging seems to be methylation patterns, or one of the main drivers, I should say. That's kind of the analog noise. If you listen to Dr. David Sinclair, he talks about, you know, a CD versus a CD reader. You know, the laser being kind of the analog, and the data on, you know, the digital data on the CD is like the DNA. And DNA methylation is, you know, helps regulate gene expression, cell differentiation as well. You know, it's what tells a lung cell to be a lung cell and a heart cell to be a heart cell. It seems like as you get older, this starts to fall apart, and you start getting too much epigenetic and methylation-based noise. And so anything you can do to reduce that noise and increase the signal seems to help with the aging, either slow down the aging process or even potentially reverse it. We don't think we'll be able to reverse it just yet, not with rapamycin or metformin, but well, not significantly. I mean, not to the point where we can make humans live past 120, but I think we can slow it down and maybe reverse some of the damage that's already been done. Dr. Watson completed the TRIM trial, also known as the thymus regeneration trial, and using metformin, growth hormone, and DHEA therapy, was actually showed that you can reverse the epigenetic methylation clock using those 3 therapies. And there's an ongoing trial to expand that right now. We might be involved in something like that down the line. We haven't quite decided yet. You know, the kind of the father of these methylation clocks, Dr. Steve Horvath. You know, his original algorithm looks at 353 CpG sites. Like I said, there's some algorithms out there that look like that look at, you know, a few, you know, anywhere from a few hundred to several 100,000. Like some of the newer chips go up to 900,000. And there's custom chips and things like that. We've also spoken to Dr. Levine. She was at UCLA, I believe now she's at Yale. She's kind of come up with this phenotypic age clock that merges some blood biomarkers along with the CpG clocks to estimate aging. And like I said, it seems like every day somebody's introducing a new clock. I think she just came out with a new clock. I can't remember if she renamed it, but I have not had a chance yet to look at it. I've been busy working on this. And the other thing we'll be looking at is a potentially experimental assessment of mTOR and autophagy. James Clement at Better Humans, he's offered us to look at various different markers of autophagy and mTOR activity. I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet, but we're hoping to bank the samples as well, so that you know, when his lab is ready, we can send those off and analyze the data. Another interesting test is glycosylation of immunoglobulins. The commercially available one is GlycanAge, developed by a professor, Gordon, I believe, Locke, forgive me if I mispronounce it. But basically the idea is that as you get older, the glycosylation pattern of immunoglobulins change, and there seems to be a correlation. We're not sure what the cause is yet, but it does seem like as you get older, the glycation pattern becomes messier and noisier. Actually, it's the other way around. Becomes you start losing glycosylation. And then, of course, microbiome. Microbiomes is still big topic. You know, we're hoping to collect stool samples from patients and look to see if rapamycin has any consequence one way or the other on the microbiome. Keep in mind, rapamycin was originally isolated to be used as an antifungal. You know, bacteria, you know, bacterial warfare, microbiome warfare is kind of one of the arsenal of this bacteria that was isolated from. So we think that'll have a favorable effect, but we won't know until we look. And then our final objective, or one of our final objectives, is actually roll out rapamycin therapy. Like I mentioned before, we've had a lot of interest in it it's just there's not enough data, not from a safety perspective, not even from a dosing perspective, to actually prescribe it currently. The few physicians that do, it's they're brave, braver than I am in terms of prescribing it. But we're hoping that this trial will give us the data that we need to confidently prescribe and confidently prescribe the right dose, the correct dose. And then, like I said, the rollout, expand the number of participants, and then look at combination. And then there's another quote from Professor Kimmelin. Not only does it increase lifespan, but also delays or even reverses nearly every age-related disease or decline in function, which has been tested in mice, rats, and companion dogs. And the list is pretty long here. All right, let's talk a little bit about funding here. So, trials can be rather expensive if anybody's familiar with the funding of clinical trials. I mean, a new drug can cost $1 billion to $2 billion to bring to market. We're not looking to bring a new market the drug. I mean, rapamycin is already an FDA approved one, and so that kind of limits, because we're not bringing a new drug to market. It's not patentable. We're not really looking to patent it either. That kind of eliminates, big pharma and biotech funding. And because we're kind of rolling this out, on a commercial scale, academic, we are talking to academic, university labs to help us with some of the testing and things like that. But that we're not necessarily relying on them for a large source. And then grants are just government grants. The NIH just doesn't want to fund anti-aging studies, longevity studies. I mean, look at the TAME trial. Dr. Barzilai has been, trying to fund that trial for years now, and he keeps hitting. I think he's finally gotten some funding for it, but it's not. It's not a it's not a slam dunk, obviously. So that leaves private donors such as AgelessRx. We're chipping in. Also we've also had several generous donors, and crowdfunding. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then part of it, we're hoping that our participants will also chip in for to offset some of the cost. This is, by the way, a total cost, and we can definitely get started with a much lower number than that. This is a little bit of breakdown. We think that the medication itself will cost, this is per participant for the entire 12 months, about $300 there. If you want to run, a lot of the lab tests, about $1,500. Some of the other tests, the methylation clocks and things like that, $1,500 or more, depending on how many and what type. We have, staffing costs, banking costs. So altogether, we think that, the trial will cost about $300 per month per patient. However, because of various donations and other things that we're doing to be a little bit creative with cost cutting, we think we can. We're targeting a cost to the participant of $120. We did a survey, and that seems to be a level where most participants are willing and able to help us out with. And then when somebody enrolls, they'll be asked to put a deposit for the first 3 months. All right, so what do you get as a participant? Blood work, obviously. First we want to limit, determine eligibility. We want to verify that you don't have uncontrolled diabetes or any of the other things that would exclude you. And then, like I said, for baseline data, but also for safety monitoring. And then we're also going to use this data for some of the BioAge calculators out there, like the Morgan Levine PhenoAge we talked about. There's a few others. We're talking to an organization called Giro, and they've developed one, and Silico's developed another one. And then this can be done. Some of this can be done at your local doctor's office, and we'll talk. We'll talk to you a little bit more about that. Our coordinators will talk to you a little bit more about that when you kind of move forward on enrolling, and or send out mobile phlebotomists. It'll likely be a mix. Some of it will be done at your doctor's office or local lab. Some will be done by mobile phlebotomists, just because some of these testing are specialized and require specialized processing, and then to transport to our biobank. And then like I said, because of our primary endpoint has to do with visceral fat, we'll be sending you to either a DEXA-fit location, somewhere else that can measure. Not every DEXA scanner has a software on it to do body composition. So if you're not near a DEXA-fit, we are going to have to do a little homework. it should be fine though. I think there are several places where we can send people. And the DEXA scan looks for visceral fat. Obviously, it gives you total bone density, not the diagnostic bone density scan that you would get if you're being screened for osteoporosis, and then lean body mass, fat mass as well. And then the dosage, it's a double blind trial, meaning I don't know what dose you're going to get. Carlo doesn't know what dose you're going to get, and then you won't know what dose you're going to get either. Well, obviously, you'll know based on you'll have a pretty good idea, but you won't know whether you're in the placebo group or not. And that's by design. A lot of people say, well, Dr. Z, why do you need a placebo? Everybody should be on rapamycin, and I agree. I think everybody should eventually be if it shows if it shows enough promise in it. But you can't underestimate the power of the placebo effect. Especially when it comes to when we're looking at the SF36 and the WOMAC, placebo can really skew those. And so we need the placebo group in order, they're important. They're arguably our most important group is the placebo group, to kind of really kind of tease out which effects are placebo, which effects are the real rapamycin. It just makes it for a much more scientifically rigorous experiment. Ethical dilemmas of placebo. Obviously, if there's a a clear approved treatment, some cancer trials, for example, skip the placebo. And then in terms of so AgelessRx, we've decided we're going to pay for all the capsules, and so nobody's actually paying for placebo capsules. The funding from the participants will be used for the blood work and staffing and things like that, not for the actual capsules. So that kind of hopefully gets around that ethical dilemma. And the other thing we're promising, if you're a participant and you turn out to be in the placebo group, we're actually going to offer you rapamycin at no charge for phase 2 for a full year. So thank you to you who are brave enough to be in our trial. And why participate? Bragging rights, you can say that you help move rapamycin forward, and rapamycin is just the beginning. We're trying to encourage this idea of citizen scientists, like I mentioned, Dr. Barzilai had encouraged as well. And then, we're going to be doing analyses and things like that you really won't find anywhere else. Like I said, the autophagy, the mTOR, I don't want to make any promises because it's not a done deal yet. We're still waiting for Better Humans to verify that that's something they can run for us right now. But like I said, there'll be a lot of experimental algorithms in terms of the methylation clocks and things like that. And then also, it'll allow us to offer rapamycin, and you'll be able to hopefully participate in future trials as well. Like I said, there'll be a lot of bonus analysis, things really you won't be able to find anywhere else. We're even talking on doing proteomics and metabolomics as well. And again, that's something that's just not easily available. But the caveat here is, the cost that I mentioned is only the base cost, the DEXA scan, the blood, some of the blood work, things like that. But we can only do extra tests if we raise enough money to fund them. And that's kind of, I'll talk about funding a little bit more, fundraising a little bit more. So what are the steps? Step 1, if you're interested and you qualify, you email us. Carlo and one of his associates, one of his assistants will we'll get back to you and help you with the screening and pre-screening, consenting, enrollment, all the baseline evaluations that we talked about. And then, if everything kind of moves forward, then you'll do a video consultation, either myself or if we have other clinical investigators on board. And then at that point, after, all the consents are signed electronically and things like that, we'll have the pharmacy or partner pharmacy ship out the rapamycin or placebo. And then ongoing, you've got week 2 and 4, you've got, we're always going to be asking you about side effects, with surveys and things like that. Of course, if anybody has a side effect they want to report, email, phone, is the best way to report it. And then, blood work, week 12, some of the same plus the questionnaire. And then months 6 and 12, basically all these things plus a repeat DEXA scan and repeat a lot of the baseline, the blood work, the stool test, the DEXA, the methylation test, things like that. And then, the questions come up. I'm already on rapamycin through, either like an online pharmacy of some sort, or or some other source. Great. Email us also. We're putting together a patient registry, and I think it'll help us collect valuable data, as well as real-world use data. There's a lot of people out there using various different dosing schedules. That would also provide valuable information on that as well. We just to touch on a higher dose. So we, like I said, we decided to add a 10 milligram once a week dose based on feedback from our community and some of our advisors. But we've also been advised maybe to look at the 20 milligram once a week dose. There's benefits to that. Obviously, it might be more powerful. Maybe some of the advocates are right. Weekly dosing obviously is ideal because it's less expensive, easier to, you just take it like on a Sunday, every Sunday. However, there's some drawbacks. It's an uncomfortably high dose. The FDA lists the maximum dose of 40 milligrams at any given time, any given day. So 20 milligrams, I mean, it's still half of that, but it's not a quarter of it, for example. So that's kind of pushing, and that's the maximum dose. That's not the common dose usually used for rapamycin or sirolimus. The other worry is if we start having some more serious side effects, that could terminate our trial, and that would be bad. And then obviously if we start looking at only weekly doses, we'll never know whether 2 times a week or 3 times a week. The dog trials are looking at 3 times a week, I believe, or some of the dog trials are. I know I've been told that dogs metabolize rapamycin a bit more quickly, so you may not necessarily compare it, but if we don't study it, we won't really know. So our compromise is that for people who do tolerate the rapamycin the best, we can then go on maybe 6, probably 12 months from now, take some volunteers and do a dose escalation. Maybe look at 15 milligrams, 18 milligrams, 20, and just kind of do more frequent testing, do more frequent monitoring. We just feel that the 20 milligram dose would be asking for trouble right now. Why is it important to participate as well? I mean, we consider this to be a groundbreaking trial. It's the first large-scale clinical trial assessing the safety and efficacy of rapamycin for longevity, but it's only the beginning. I mean, like I said, we want to kind of build the infrastructure to start looking at other therapies as well. There's so many other promising therapies out there. But there just seems to be so little data. Somebody needs to study it on a very systemic basis. The old paradigm shift. Anybody's familiar with new drug coming to market? New molecule is patentable. Usually it's single molecule focus, but it's very, very expensive. Anywhere between $500 million to upwards of $2 billion. The median is almost just shy of $1 billion, and it takes time. 12 years on average. Super high failure rate. Only about 5 out of 5,000 molecules enter preclinical. Of the 5 that make it to preclinical, only 1 of those 5 get approved. So that's a huge failure rate there. And of course, to make up for all the expense and all the risk and all the rest of that, they have to price the drug really, really high. It's not that the new drug costs very much. A lot of times new drugs cost just as much as generic drugs to produce, but it's all the rest of this that you have to make up the cost for. So new drug can be anywhere between $500 to $10,000 per month, and that's just one treatment. So we're kind of looking at it a different way. Our new model is kind of looking at off patent or molecules that are soon to be off patent. There are some good ones that are coming off patent in the next few years. Relatively inexpensive. I mean, metformin is a good example. I mean, all in on our platform right now. If you want a metformin prescription, it's really fairly inexpensive. Time efficient. Instead of 12 years, we might be able to get some answers in 12 months. And then we don't have to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. That's why our trial is considered to be phase 4, because we're not really seeking a new approval. We're kind of looking at a different use for an existing drug. But that means an already approved off patent has metformin has a ton of data, rapamycin has a good amount of data, being around for 20 years or so now. And then, our focus is on making the prescription widely available. Whereas, biotech companies, I respect them. I have a lot of respect for them and their, the challenges they go through and all the risks that they take. But at the end of the day, a lot of times they're just focused on single molecules. And we're focusing on a single molecule right now, rapamycin, but in the future that, we're not going to solve aging with any one molecule. I mean, that's the chance of that happening is extremely remote. It's going to take a combination, and we're not even sure what that combination is yet. There's a lot of hypotheses and things like that, but we won't really know until we start testing. And of course, encourages webinars like this, participations from citizen scientists, people who are enthusiastic and want to step up, and combinations. Combination. So what can you do to help? We're direct monetary contributions. We'll be launching a crowdfunding and spreading the word. Our crowdfunding is through the Life Extension Advocacy Foundation. Thank you for hosting that for us. It's not live yet. We hope to have it live, don't quote me on this, by the end of the month, maybe early February. But people asking, what do you do with that money? I've kind of already talked about it a little bit. The more we raise, the more we can do. The idea is that like here's an example. Microbiome test. If we wanted to run 3 samples on all 375 participants at around $250 per sample, including analysis and things like that, it'll cost us, $280,000. If we want to do proteomics, that's a little bit higher price tag. Now, obviously, we're not gonna necessarily need to run all the tests on all the subset, all the samples. We could be very economic with it and just take subsets of samples, see what shows, and maybe expand it. And that's to be cognizant of the funds, and to make sure we use them as wisely as possible. Obviously, the more that we have, the more that we raise, the more we can do, and the better the insights, the better the data. One thing I didn't mention about the methylation clocks, we've been told by several people in the field that we may not necessarily see any changes with the blood-based DNA methylation clocks, and that's based on the opinion from Dr. Horvath himself, as well as preliminary results from a 30-person rapamycin trial that's underway right now. And so that kind of highlights the importance of looking at different tests, not just relying on one test. And that's why we're trying to look at as many tests as we can get our hands on, because we're not optimistic we're going to see any changes to the methylation clock. And I'm going to say that up front. We've been warned, but we need to run it anyway, because people ask us, why don't you run a blood-based methylation clock? That's kind of become almost the gold standard. However, might be, for example, DHEA, for example, that was part of the TRIM trial. That seems to consistently change the DNA methylation clock. I'm not quite sure what the mechanism of action there. Maybe somebody in the biochemistry community can kind of enlighten me on that. But that goes to show that some therapies might affect one aspect of these biomarkers, and another therapy might affect another aspect. And so that kind of highlights the importance of looking at many different aspects. And again, down the line, when we start looking at different therapies, combination therapies, we need a lot more holistic view rather than telomeres. Like, for example, there was that hyperbaric oxygen trial that just got published. That it improved telomere length. Well, we're not sure. Does that actually translate to longevity, or is that just one measure? We don't know. So that kind of highlights the importance of why we need to raise the funds in order to look at more of these. And like I said, preparing for the future, we're hoping to build an infrastructure here, not just a single trial. And then it'll feed into our telemedicine offering, allow us to offer a lot more therapies down the line. And then just a kind of a quick thank you for everybody who's either we've spoken to, discussed. These are potential collaborators. I apologize if I missed anybody on this list, but we've been talking to a lot of people, and we've greatly appreciated the input from everybody. It's been a great journey getting us here to where we're at today, and I think the fun is only beginning to start. There's a couple references. These references are pulled from our protocol. All right, thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation.
Dr. Z, thank you. And I believe Dr. James Watson hopped on at some point during the call. Is Dr. Watson still in the audience? Might have dipped in and dipped out, so. All right, so Dr. Z, thank you so much for taking the time to kind of go through your slide deck and being quite thorough and timely. We actually have 10 more minutes than I thought we would.
All right.
Based on the slides that you have. I've been a little bit proactive inside responding to the queries through the chat. Could you go ahead and switch over to the eligibility slide with the inclusion criteria for me, Dr. Z?
Sure. Let me see if I can get back to that quickly here.
Thank you. And then while you do that, you were referencing a study, was it with Dr. Clement with the 30 rapamycin trial that's currently underway, or was there another study you were referencing?
There's another organization. I don't know if I can talk about that publicly or not, but it was just a colleague who kind of mentioned some preliminary data, very preliminary data. And like I said, that kind of echoes a lot of data sets that Steve Horvath and other people in the who've looked at methylation clock data for rapamycin, whether it be humans, rats, other organisms, published, non-published. So we're obviously going to be looking at the methylation clock, but for blood-based methylation, we're not very hopeful we'll find. Maybe if we at certain doses. However, saliva-based may be different. There might be something about the epithelial cells that might, where their DNA methylation patterns might respond differently than white blood cells.
Thank you. I'm going through the queries, and I think I've hit most of these. Dr. Z, if you can kind of go into detail around the extension of the trial once we kind of come to a dose that we feel comfortable with and what we would do for individuals that are currently on the placebo arm. And then also what does phase 2 kind of look like as we scale up to that 1,000 participant size?
So let's see here, where was that? Anyway, let me put the inclusion slide because I think a lot of people wanted the inclusion exclusion. Basically, we want more data on the dose that seems to be more promising. And obviously the best way to get more data is to have more participants. And so we're hoping that one dosing schedule will stick out as being superior to the others. We're not sure, I mean, obviously, because nobody's really looked. But if that turns out to be the case, if it doesn't and all four, seem to work just fine, then we'll just have to pick one and go with it. But the idea is that we want to, the phase 2 will help us bring one step closer to actually start offering it to a wider public. So the idea is, like I said, pick one data. We won't necessarily need a placebo at that point. Pick one dose. We won't need a placebo, and then we can just continue to monitor a larger group of patients to look for. Look for things that may not have come up on the smaller study.
Thank you. What just came in is about folks that are eligible to likely end up in the registry, and it's around folks who are already kind of self-medicating or self-dosing with rapamycin, and how can they get involved and participate. And it's going to be through the mechanism of the registry that we're also producing in parallel for the trial. And that registry has a couple of purposes: folks that are currently on rapamycin, folks that are international that have been utilizing rapamycin themselves that are not eligible to pull themselves off the product for a few months and then join us locally for the testing. So we are developing a robust real-world data observational registry to kind of keep inclusive of everyone who wants to contribute from the citizen science components for this community. For future phases, do we have any interest on modifying the exclusion criteria, Dr. Z, or that's a pretty consistent as we go from phase 1 to phase 2 of the trial?
I think the question was about bringing the age down to 40. There's a couple tricky things with bringing it down to 40. First of all, we would probably have to exclude most women from that because I believe rapamycin is not safe for pregnancy. So women in that 40 to 50 age group, it'd be a little bit more complicated. The other thing is there's some thought that like, for example, take senolytics. When you're young, senescent cells might be protective, based on some of the experts I've heard speak on that field. But when you're older, they start to work against you. So I'm not sure. I can't really answer that question right now. I suspect we'd probably always keep something like rapamycin at an older age. Whereas, for example, metformin might be just fine because it's not nearly as strong of an mTOR inhibitor as rapamycin. Metformin, for example, is used extensively in younger people, fertility clinics, weight loss clinics, things like that. Even younger diabetics, I think. So I don't know. I'd actually have to do a little bit more reading on that. But 50 seems to be the age where aging seems to accelerate, although that could just be an arbitrary number. So to answer the question, no, I don't think we're going to go down to 40, not with rapamycin
I would like to stress that the trial is really curated to be a telemedicine decentralized trial. If there was potential to have more site of care post-pandemic, more engagement with local facilities that can help with more stringent adverse events reporting, it would provide some flexibility of future studies that we can have more touch points directly with participants. So I think it's one of those growing things that we like to get more involved with, and that's kind of to another individual's question around participation on research collaborations as well, which correct me if I'm wrong, that we are very open to, Dr. Z.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're already collaborating with a lot of organizations on testing, and also like looking at other things to test once we kick off rapamycin and things are going well.
Can you go into the thoughts on the premenopausal exclusion for Dwayne in the chat?
Yeah, like I said, it mostly has to do with the risk of pregnancy. I mean, because I can't remember. I think rapamycin is either category D or X for pregnancy. So that would not be something we would want to. It'd be an extra complication we would have to manage for that age group for women. Not necessarily has anything with the menopause, with menstruation or anything like that itself. Like I said, I'm not sure if there'll be any benefit for patients under the age of 50. Like I said, it could be like senolytics, where you may actually do harm under a certain age. Or at least we think you'll do harm under a certain age. Again, nobody's really studied senolytics in healthy patients. It's just kind of a theory at this point.
And I apologize, I saw something about a TRIM trial question, but I can't find it in the chat now that I've...
Yeah, somebody, I think Ali had asked about the TRIM. Yeah, I mentioned the TRIM trial, and the follow-on to is TRIM-X. I think they're expanding it, Intervene Immune. We've spoken to Intervene Immune as well. We had some discussions about potentially getting involved in a TRIM or TRIM-like trial. We don't have any immediate plans to do that. But yeah, I think they're currently doing growth hormone, DHEA, and metformin. And like I mentioned, Dr. Watson was the principal investigator on the original TRIM trial. I don't think he's involved in the TRIM-X.
I think, except for the ones that are popping in now, that we should have been able to hit most of the Q&As. One of the questions that came in before was, let me just pull it up right over here. How many tests would be involved and how much blood collection would be needed over the entire study? So currently we have a benchmark that you could primarily do with your healthcare provider, or we'll work to coordinate a mobile phlebotomist to go to your site. There's a couple of tests that will be happening throughout the rest of the study, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 months, and 12 months, that you might anticipate either collecting your own sample if it's saliva, or having mobile phlebotomists going to your house and drawing some peripheral blood. So those are kind of the touch points that we would have outside of the DEXA-fit body scans, and the rest of the communication engagements would be done completely remotely online. So thank you for that question beforehand. And I think we might actually end at the right time for once.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carlo, for putting this together, and thanks for everybody for your interest and showing up this evening. My email is at the end, just basically doctor@AgelessRx, research@AgelessRx is the email, all things trial. We hope to see you participate for those who can.
All right, thanks everyone. This recording will be provided online on the Pearl website and likely the lifespan.io. We'll do a draft of the Q&A with the answers that will be transcribed. And we'll have all the links for the donations when those go live with the interest forms as well. So be sure to keep an eye out on your inbox as well as communication on the websites themselves. So thanks everyone.